Thank you so much for joining us for our closing panel. Had the honour of coming after Rachel. That was a brilliant session. What did everyone think? Any temperature? Just looking for you to make some general noise, some vowel sounds is what we're after. Nice. Right, shall we head over to our panel and we'd love you to introduce yourselves.
Hello, good afternoon. What a fantastic day it's been so far. I'm Leena Mooneeram and I am a senior platform engineer at Chainalysis, the data platform for the blockchain.
I'm Kief Morris. I'm a principal infrastructure engineer for ThoughtWorks, author of a book from O'Reilly called Infrastructure as Code. So I'm working on the third edition right now. Yeah, that's me.
Hi everyone, I'm Kunal Kushwaha. I work as a developer relations manager at Civo, which is a cloud native service provider. Yeah, great conference.
Thanks everyone. I'm Jessica. I'm your panel host. I do IT operations at CyberSafe, and a lot of that was ringing quite close to home for me. I don't know about you. Did you have any sort of big lessons or surprises that came from today?
I think it's been quite interesting. I think there's been a number of themes that I've picked up on along today. And some of them actually, my favourite one was about documentation and about how it is the most basic version of our platform and how very often it is so neglected because nobody wants to write documentation. So I'm really pleased that it's given the airing. And in fact, I've taken a load of tasks to do tomorrow.
It's a good point you bring that up. I think there was I don't know if anyone was following the Microsoft recall story, but I think their approach to remediation was a serious update to documentation, which is often, part of the platform we forget about. What about you two?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see the themes that are emerging, which is, one of the things that struck me was really that we're kind of moving beyond thinking about platforms as a way of controlling developers and forcing them to kind of do what we want them to do, and more as a means of collaboration between the people across the organization. So it's much more of a focus on how do we kind of integrate and share across the organization. So more of a kind of empowering approach. So I thought that I felt like an underlying theme through a lot of today, which is refreshing.
Yeah, plus one to that point, and I had a lot of conversations around how folks are now supporting developers. Other than that, I got different answers for what DevOps is. So I don't want to say that maybe we haven't really picked one definition. And you talk about, I had some conversations around DevOps versus platform engineering. Many people gave so many different answers, and that was just interesting to see.
I mean, going off of that point, do you think there can be one answer? I mean, in Rachel's talk just now, we were talking about how DevOps, it was first introduced, was it 20 years ago now? Because that feels ridiculous.
2009, I think, is when it first.
2009, okay, sorry, that was far too hasty of me. But a lot has changed over the past decade and a half. Do you think we can have one definition?
Platform engineering, I think, in relation with DevOps, it's building on top of it. So it's not I don't like the term DevOps versus platform engineering. Mm-hmm. I would say platform engineering, if I had to pick one word, about foundation, and DevOps is more about practices that are built on top of that foundation. Mm-hmm. So it's not like a versus thing. How many people have heard DevOps is dead? Yeah, I don't like that.
Very quiet funeral with the one hand. It's a shame. Well, we are all here at PlatformCon, and we are supporting developers and meeting them where they are, as you say, with that sort of idea of building empathy into the systems we're creating. What do you think is changing about the nature of the platforms we need to support, about the needs of the developers that we're working with? This is a very good chance to bring in AI into the equation if you'd like to.
I'm not going to use AI. And I think it's just a very interesting question. I think it very much depends on the organisation that you're in. And I think it goes back to understanding your customers and understanding the engineers that you are trying to support. So I don't know if I can give you an answer.
That's fair. No? No one? No? That's fine. From the talks today, we were talking about, Keith, you brought up how we need to be able to support people where they're at and build that sort of golden path. Have you seen any interesting, surprising applications of solutions that you wouldn't necessarily expect to see? Have you have you been supporting anything that you wouldn't expect to support in supporting a golden path? You know, and when you have to like meet people with the tools that they're already using. Have you like come across a tool and been like, really? We need to start
I think
supporting Cucumber?
So the point that was cited from Abby about using ticketing systems, I think that's an interesting thing. So I've seen an approach to a platform and a kind of developer portal kind of platform that started with the ticketing kind of thing. So what they did to start with was to say, we're going to have a journey for provisioning, some infrastructure, standard. It was a cloud account. How can we provision a cloud account? And the old way was we raise a ticket and people go off and do the things and then, return your ticket and say, yeah, it's been completed. And so the first step was, well, we're going to just put an interface on that. So you're going to go to the form and fill out, here's my, my expense code or what have you against that. Whatever I need for my AWS account, and I'm going to click the button, and then what happens is it raises the ticket, and the people go off and create the thing, and then it comes back in the portal at the point later. And it was interesting because it was like, I think going back to the thing also about documentation of like starting where people are at. So this is the first thing is just to see, okay, let's put this interface on it so that people know where to go. They have a single place to go. And also then we're going to see the process, the process, we're not going to change the process. We're going to see, do we need to change the process, right? We can start measuring how often do people actually make this request? Maybe it's not often enough that we need to automate it. Maybe it's fine. And what is the time lapse, turnaround time for things? Maybe like 2 days for one account a month is okay. And so starting that way and then thinking about how to automate. I thought that was a really interesting approach that I've seen recently.
So not factoring in too many assumptions at the very early stage.
Yeah, it's not jumping to the solution like, oh, we need to fix this thing and we'll fix it in this way. It's like, okay, let's start by understanding where we're at.
It kind of links back to what you were saying, Leena, about there being so many, it being so dependent on the structure of the organization that you're working in. Do you have any, I wonder whether or not you have any hallmarks of any good developer experiences that you kind of like to, that brought you joy in the past? Or have you seen others have seen to be illicit joy in other people? There's a sentence there.
I suppose as a platform engineer, what brings me joy is when I have our feature engineers or our application engineers actually saying, actually, this was very helpful. This was really useful, it was easy to use. So I think that's what we're aiming for. But going back to perhaps your question about golden paths, and kind of unique features, I would say that if someone was asking me to build an automation for something that perhaps wasn't used very often or was unique, was a little bit left field, I would question whether or not we needed to build that automation. So I would second your answer about let's just monitor it, let's see how often we're being asked for it before investing any time in building that golden path and that automation towards that.
So doing some more sort of understanding as to whether or not, where did that problem come from, what's behind that?
That goes back to the golden path might just be the documentation, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, second the points. Yeah. We only have 30 minutes and a lot to cover. So I didn't want to repeat anything.
Do you have any specific examples of developer experiences that you found really memorable, that really stood out to you, that kind of made something just perfectly easy, just really helped you see something through to completion?
I'd pick two. When you specifically talk about experiences, the documentation has to be spot on. And if we talk about platform engineering, I'd say automation. And I think that's where the future is as well. And I think more abstraction in the future, like cloud providers did it for virtual machines, Kubernetes did it for containers, and now platforms are doing it for services and applications. So I think in the future, teams would be smaller. Like there was a point raised, like people don't want to be dependent on like other teams if they want to use some, like developers, for example, they just want to be like, okay, I needed, I don't know, Redis, and I needed it yesterday. I don't want to worry about the infrastructure or whatever. So I think in the future, yeah, teams would be smaller, automation, more abstraction, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
On that point of the future, do you have any future predictions that you think might come around? Obviously, restructuring is a big popular thing right now. Automation is getting a lot of attention.
Just the point I mentioned before, but in addition to that, then it brings another concern. If you're providing more abstraction, then let's say for bigger organizations, how do you make it more secure, the platforms, compliances and all these other things. But I think in the future, like I mentioned, yeah, I'm seeing more, like looking forward to more abstraction, especially for developers, and more automation. And that's the other point of on AI. Like I don't know if you want to talk about AI, but use of AI in platform engineering, maybe, more automation and monitoring. Yeah, it's a continuous process. Platform engineering, it's not like, okay, you just did it once and you're done with it. It's a continuous process. And I think that's where I'd like to see AI help out.
I think the abstraction thing is an interesting point because, so I work with infrastructure in particular. If you look at infrastructure as code tools, they're super low level, right? And so in order to write Terraform code, Plumi code, CDK, whatever, you really have to understand the nuts and bolts of very fine-grained details of what the cloud platform is providing. And not everybody wants to have to work with that. But I think an interesting point with platforms and abstraction and these kind of things, and I think this goes again to that trend of let's empower users and help them to collaborate rather than kind of constrict them and restrain them, is you have that abstraction as a useful thing, right? So it's not, oh, we're going to hide the details from you, and then when something goes wrong, you don't know or you don't understand it. It's saying, I want to have context, right? So I'm working on business logic in my application. I want to think about that. I don't want to think about, okay, how does a routing table work for I don't want to have to worry about that, right? Unless I'm working on this thing and then I'm finding, there's some kind of issue, a performance thing, whatever, and I want to be able to look. So it's kind of like context switching or cognitive load or cognitive context, I guess, saying I want to be able to get in there and see what's going on if I need to, but I don't want to have to. And so I think that's one of the challenges that we have going forward is to work out how to really make that work well for people.
And how to expose things with enough, as you say, context to be able to, okay, I have this information now. Great, this is building. What do I do with that information? Yep. Okay. Do you have anything to add about the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of, I think what I'd like to see more of is actually, I think it was raised in the panel, the opening panel. So I'd be really interested to see how platform engineering develops our day two operations. So how do we help maintain what we've helped to create? Rather than, I think, potentially for a lot of teams right now, is that we're helping application teams spin up new resources and spin up new services, but that effectively is the end of our involvement. So it'd be great to start thinking about a little bit beyond that and how do we keep the quality of the code consistently high.
Definitely, and make the responsibility fun and achievable and approachable.
And easy, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Do you have any? I think I think a couple of the early speakers kind of spoke about the not just kind of opening up the road, like paving the road, but also just making, as you say, maintenance a bit more approachable and exciting. Have you seen any sort of developer portals that, from your conversations today, that you think are doing it particularly well? Any that are doing it very, very badly, name and shame.
I don't think I could kind of point to any particular products or tools either way. I think it's going beyond the developer portal as you say, as a way to like spin up a new thing, provision a new thing, and then kind of like now it's yours. But having that way of so where does that come from? So who's providing that, and are they providing it in a way that when they can send out an updated version and it becomes visible? So I think what I'd like to see is to where essentially it's like like your phone apps, right? You get there's an update available. When you're ready, click on it to do the update, and here's a list of all the things that have new versions, and you can go and see what's in them. So to give you that control, but also to make it easy, so it's not where it often is, where it's like, well, the infrastructure team has now decided they're going to upgrade the Kubernetes clusters on this day, and it's going to be down. Oh, it turns out it's down for a couple of days because something went wrong. It's giving you the control, but still making it easy to do. Not that there's got to be a term for it. It's having the control and the empowerment without necessarily having the responsibility for doing it all, rolling up your sleeve and doing it all yourself. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to name any products. There are so many out there. There's, I think Victor did a demo with Port, which was nice. But the conversation I had with people there were two strains to it. Do you use a SaaS provider, or do you build your own IDP?
Yeah.
So that's maybe a good topic. But yeah, who's using SaaS providers? Maybe you can show raise of hands.
For IDP specifically, or
yeah. or who's building their own.
Yeah, internally.
Okay. Others are not doing anything.
There's a half hand in the front. Is that a midway through sort of the experience?
It's because there are trade-offs too. Yeah.
On that point on trade-offs, this came up while you were talking, Kief, about the sort of level of abstraction to expose. The more that you kind of expose, it can really sort of uncover the problems in the structure of your organization. Suddenly you have one engineer that's overwhelmed with about 50 one-line PRs trying to change the same one bit of like infrastructure, the same kind of Terraform change. If you're in that, that's elicited a bit of a reaction from you, Leena. Do you have any?
I don't know. I mean, obviously what we're trying to do is reduce that sort of repetitive task for an engineer. So if we would certainly try and look, if that was a change that we were pushing out, we would certainly try and look to automate that as easy as possible. But certainly in terms of, so just going back really to the day two sort of operations, I'd be looking at tools like kind of Renovate to manage kind of dependencies, dependency versions, and trying to kind of build as much of that almost out of the box into our platform for our engineers.
Yes.
And I think one of the techniques we've found useful with some of our clients is taking things like, so wordly mapping was mentioned this morning, also things like domain-driven design, event storming, taking those kind of things which are often used for kind of application design, especially when you get to things like event storming and so on, and basically drilling those down out into, okay, what platform services and what other kind of capabilities and stuff can we include in that to identify the organizational kind of things, right? So where is it? Okay, this person, is on their own as kind of actually a linchpin for a lot of stuff. So maybe we need to kind of think about where that is. So I think applying a lot of those techniques that we know from, from software engineering and software design and applying those to our platforms and our infrastructure can be really fruitful.
I second that, and also listing down like what your expectations are, and what are you hoping to achieve out of it. The other thing is that even though it's a platform engineering conference, many people are not really using it. And we did a survey last year which said it was a few thousand people, and around 85% of folks were implementing DevOps practices, but only 40% knew what platform engineering is. And out of the people who implemented platform engineering, 50% saw efficiency and other things. The number one reason, however, for resistance for platform engineering was resistance to change in their organization. That was the main challenge for adopting these practices.
Can I ask just out of curiosity? So, how in your survey, how did you kind of define platform engineering when you asked them, "Are you doing it?" What was the specific questions?
We asked if they're using any developer portals for any IDPs. And the survey also had just basics in terms of are you familiar with the term platform engineering? Out of that, only 40% people said yes. We are using DevOps practices, for example, CI/CD and automation, but we don't have a dedicated platforms team to bridge that gap between devs.
Interesting.
So for that, 40% people said yes, we have an idea. And out of those 40 who had implemented and who had internal portals, 50% said that, yeah, so it worked well for us. But a huge number of people did not really do it. And when we asked why in the question, they were resistance to change in our organization.
Can we focus on the resistance to change? Because when we leave today, we're all going to go back to our organizations, which we obviously love, and we will have the cold light of day, the reality of kind of solving a lot of these challenges and facing this resistance to change. So, I mean, from your background working in consultancies, from working in chain on the more bleeding edge of technology, what do you have as a recommendation to kind of meeting this resistance to change and not being stranded in this almost island this echo chamber where you kind of talk about all these platform engineering concepts and the understanding grows, but the practices don't necessarily develop? How do you meet change, resistance to change?
So I think a really key thing, and it kind of goes to some of the things that we've been hearing today, is you have to kind of approach it from the user's point of view, right? So the number one piece of advice I say is find a problem. Talk to the users and find out a problem that they have, that they say this is a problem, and try to solve that, rather than trying to come to them and say, oh, I've got a solution for this problem, and them saying, hey, that's great, I've got this other thing I have to deal with, right? Yeah. So I think that's start from where they're feeling pain and try to help them with that, and they'll love you.
But I suppose you can get resistance to change at a number of different levels. So there can be resistance within, I guess, a DevOps or platform team to kind of new practices or different ways of implementation. There can be resistance within the application engineers themselves in terms of using, as you've mentioned, using the tools or the solutions perhaps that you're providing. But there can also be resistance at a leadership level in terms of actually, I guess, being able to set up and spin up a platform team or a specific team to deal with that. And sometimes I find that platform, it's quite difficult to justify in that we don't sell a product externally. How do we validate and show our return on investment? And so I think that's a challenge.
Yeah, and I think exactly, and I think that's a good point. Is that at the different points, I think the answer is the same. Is like, so if the leadership are resistant, then you say, okay, what are the problems they're feeling? And it's like, well, okay, I'm spending loads of money on people who are monkeying around with these tools that I don't understand why, and I need to get features out, or we have these business problems to solve, and so you have to kind of like think about, okay, how can what are those business problems they're trying to solve, and where can this stuff help them, genuinely, like, where is it going to help? And so that also helps you to guide, okay, maybe we should be focusing here. Maybe I was thinking here because I saw this technical problem that I think, that we got to fix that. But then we're finding actually from a business point of view, maybe it's a different problem we need to solve. So
absolutely. But then I think it's a platform responsibility to show how we've contributed to resolving those issues. And I'm not 100% sure that we have that.
Yeah, it's hard.
Down,
I think Hannah's talk was really good on the, with the, the budgets, on the, the availability, because that right there is that gives you a framework to have that conversation that the people in the leadership can understand. Okay, this is why I should invest or what have you.
Absolutely, and this is the change that we've affected. Yeah. Absolutely.
No, 100%. It reminds me of something I heard a while ago of you can have as many nines as you can afford. It's putting the right metrics on it can really help people to understand that yes, employing this process and employing this service actually will impact our uptime and actually will impact things like customer happiness and other things that we can outwardly report on. But I think that's just such an interesting point that you brought up about really communicating our ROI. Have you got any tips to give the audience on that? Or our moderator right now, please.
I'd be really interested to hear how the teams do it, because I always think I have this half-written talk that I've actually submitted once, but I'm waiting to hear back, and it's about platform's superpower, and I think our superpower is invisibility, because when everything is working, nobody notices us, right? Nobody knows that we're here. You're deploying fine, there's no issues. It's only when things are on fire that generally platform gets a little bit of PR. It's not necessarily the PR that you want. So I do think that we need to be better at vocalizing our wins and celebrating our wins and talking about what we do. And I think there's work to do, I think, across platform to find a consistent means and a consistent way of doing that.
Right, I hate it. So true. We tried to address this recently by having in our kind of internal speakeasy and hack kind of days, we had a session for the platform team to kind of talk about the small things that we're doing to make everyday life a little bit easier for developers. And that went down really well. So do you have any anecdotes of times that as communicating your ROI has been successful?
Just regarding
on a good note, please.
What we were talking about earlier, who's +1 to what Leena mentioned, but we were talking about resistance to change, and I don't know if this works for everyone or not, but making changes gradually rather than at once is what I would advise. And then obviously continuously monitoring, because it's like an ongoing process. And then checking if you're getting the ROI. And before that, even before you do anything, listing down what your expectations are when you make these changes so that you can match it with like, okay, this is what we expected, whether that be business or technical or whatever. But yeah, doing things gradually rather than just at once is maybe one something. Yeah.
But I mean, I could give you 3 points that I try to do in terms of kind of amplifying platform across my organisation. So one, celebrate every win, however small, celebrate it and celebrate it publicly. Two, get your engineering organisation or your customers used to hearing from you. So establish a regular comms cadence. So whether it's newsletters, office hours, but get them used to hearing from you and hearing about what you do and your new features so they expect it and they'll miss it when it's gone or when it's not there. And then the third one is cultivate evangelists. So I think that I could tell you how wonderful our platform is, and I could tell all our customers, I'm not 100% sure that they believe me all the time, but they would believe one of my engineers who uses the platform on a daily basis. So what we try and do is when we get good feedback is ask those engineers is would they be willing to put it on the channel or put a feedback or a review of how they use it on the channel? Would they be prepared to record maybe a 5-minute video of how they've used a particular feature? And just create those evangelists that are not in the platform team, but get other people talking about the platform.
Love those. I think those are those real hallmarks of the sort of product-centric approach we're taking to platform engineering that's kind of evolving our thinking bit by bit of remembering, okay, our users, how can we help them to evangelize, how can we listen to their needs a little bit better and so on. Kief, have you got anything to add here, or Kunal?
It all ties in with empathy, what Leena mentioned.
5 minutes.
Yeah, because when we talk about coding, it's about delivering messages to, machines and people. And wherever you're talking about delivering messages or communication, that's the word, empathy is playing a role automatically. So is empathy relevant to engineers? Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I think one of the kind of interesting things is when you get people together from across different, so maybe people in kind of product or that side of the organization, and then people on the kind of more technical and platform side, and getting them into the same room to talk about what are the kind of things that we're trying to do, and then bring out the conversations where it's like things start to click for people because people on the technical side start thinking, this is how something I'm working on could help, achieve this problem or solve this problem or whatever, and then vice versa. The people on maybe the kind of product side are starting to hear about some of the kind of difficulties or even opportunities from the platform side. And so I think just getting people in the same room to have a common conversation can really help to kind of build that empathy. And it's surprising how rare that's a thing. It's surprising how, as a consultant, how often I'm coming in and introducing people who work at the same company to each other.
But do you think you have a little bit of an edge there? So they'll tell you because you're.
As a consultant, like it's an excuse, right? Like, so they're not going to just spontaneously get together, but like, okay, we're here for a limited time, and experts from the outside or whatever, from out of town, and so that gives it a kind of excuse to have these conversations that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. But you can, you don't need. I shouldn't say this, but you don't need to have a consultant come in to make you do this, right? Just you can do it for yourself.
How do you facilitate that now that we're more kind of increasingly remote and hopefully staying that way?
Yeah. Sometimes I think it's the kind of event that might be worth having people come together for if you can. But even where it's not, it's like it's just getting into kind of the nerdy details, I guess. But it's like it's those Miro boards and mural boards and those kind of stuff where because we always used to do them. Our kind of thing is like we would just like use loads of stickies up on walls, right? And so now we just kind of do that virtually.
Talking about coming together, our time is drawing to a close. I just wondered whether or not you wanted to have if there are any final thoughts that you're coming away from today with, any sort of, I said aside from your 3 tips, which I'm absolutely implementing this week, and are giving me the optimism to kind of focus on some of the wins from the recent quarter. What have you taken away from today? What's kind of staying with you?
I've got 2 actions that I'm planning to implement tomorrow. So one is I'm getting in touch with our in-house technical writer and trying to arrange a session for the platform team. So I'm going to thank you, Sarah Wells, if you're here. Definitely doing that. And then secondly, I can't remember which talk I thought about this was actually just creating a little bit of an open forum so that engineers or platform can just turn up and say, well, look, this is what I'm thinking of doing. And so we can hear about whether other people across engineering have faced similar problems or have already solved it, and perhaps we don't know. So it's just a bit of a discussion group.
Nice. Kief, any?
I guess it's thinking more. Again, I'll refer back to Hannah's talk where she had those kind of great graphs of the trade-offs between in the prioritization of the kind of availability. I really like that, so I want to kind of think about that for other aspects of those. Again, that communication of what's the kind of ROI from a business standpoint, and what do the kind of leaders want. How can we kind of communicate things better, have better conversations across those lines?
It's a really important one to remember, isn't it? Yeah, the syntax that we use when we're in those different spaces as well. What do you think now?
Yeah, great day, good conversations. I just have a quick poll because I did this talk at this one conference. So we spoke about abstraction quite a lot. Like, okay, you build a platform, developers just want to focus on writing code, not worry about infrastructure, da. So when we talk about like, so we did these things before, like with operating systems, for example, right? So would you say, raise of hands, is operating systems are sort of like maybe can be related to platform engineering or not? If your answer is yes, if you can show a raise of hands, otherwise no. Okay, wow, thank you. No, I did this talk and this was a question that was discussed, but yeah, similar problems, different domains and ways to do it, but yeah, I think future is abstraction and more automation and AI.
Fantastic. I think that is all the time I have. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm going to hand back to the brilliant Paula, and thank you so much, Panis. Really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.